Well, welcome back, folks. Today we're going to go ahead and install the rear wheel assembly into the Yamaha YL1 rear swing arm. But before I did that, I thought I'd go over the basic hardware that will be involved. This doesn't obviously include the wheel or the rim itself, but I thought I'd just quickly go through this with you. In terms of the assembly itself, working right to left, and the front of the bike would be the direction my finger is pointing, which would be that way. We have the axle. Of course, it goes all the way through. We have the right side chain adjuster. This is new. You can still get this from Yamaha. Then we have a spacer. That's the original spacer that I replated, zinc plated. The brake shoe backer plate with the brake shoes already installed. That was reviewed in a previous video. The sprocket carrier itself with the sprocket attached. We also had reviewed that in a previous video, me putting that together. Inside of here, down where my finger is pointing, you can see there's a bushing right here. That's a new bushing from Yamaha. And not NOS, they still actually supply that part. The left side chain adjuster, also new. By the way, the nuts and washers on both of these adjusters are new from Yamaha. This is the bags that they came in here. Those are new parts, still available. This is the large nut that's used to pull the, there's a carrier in here that fits through the inside of the sprocket carrier, and it pulls the sprocket carrier over to the left. So that's what this nut is for, and it's threaded onto that insert carrier. You can see right there my finger's pointing. And then the axle nut. The axle nut is also new. I think I got it off of eBay if I recall, and I picked that up a month or two ago now because I needed another one. I need two of them. One for here, and I don't recall right offhand what I had used the other one for, but I remember I had to buy two at the same time. It might have been the front axle. In fact, I think it was the front axle nut, now that I think it through. That's the basic hardware. Now these chain adjusters, the left and the right chain adjusters, are not the same. They are different because the one on the left, which goes over this larger spindle, which has flats on it right here. Let me zoom in on that just a little bit for you. You can see the flats on that. This adjuster is larger in size to fit over essentially that flattened nut like that. This adjuster on this side is just large enough to go over the axle, so the center hole is smaller. So those are not the same, and they're not interchangeable. This one won't fit, the right one won't fit on the left. The left one would work on the right, but it's not the right one. That's the hardware setup. Now we'll go ahead and move over to the bike and see if we can't put this together. As I was recently editing this video on installing the rear wheel assembly into the swing arm, a thought occurred to me. And that is that the process that I'm going to demonstrate that you see in the rest of this video is a little bit different than what is often recommended by manufacturers. And what I mean by that is it's fairly common, and when you read reference factory or aftermarket service manuals, they will suggest taking the sprocket carrier, and that's this section right here, that the sprocket is mounted to, which is separate from the wheel hub, in mounting that to the bike first by pulling through that inner axle and snugging up this larger here of the two nuts. So pre-mounting the sprocket carrier to the bike, then positioning the wheel in and continuing on with the assembly, much like you'll see. I'll demonstrate here in a few minutes. Either approach works fine. But what I didn't want to do is confuse folks, and the technique that I use, that I'll demonstrate, is the one that I've used commonly for many years. I've done it both ways, It's just a minor variation to the way that I will demonstrate shortly. I prefer my method. I just find it's less fiddly and there's less jockeying around of parts. That's my opinion. If you're more comfortable using the method that you might find in one of the service manuals, by all means use that. I'm not suggesting you can't. It does work. It's just not my chosen way to do it. So I want to clarify that point during this video, before going into this next portion of the video where I actually do the assembly, is I want to make sure people were aware of the fact that I am clear on the different methods. I've used them both, but I wanted to demonstrate the technique that I prefer to use. So with that said, let's get on with the rest of this video. I'm about ready now to go ahead and start putting things back together. You can see I've already positioned the tire and rim underneath the fender here carefully. I have the tire propped up a bit because remember the center stand is designed to get the rear wheel up off the ground. So I've got the rear of the bike lower down a bit, and then I brought the tire up on this towel to try to get alignment between the swing arm pass-throughs in the axle hole in the center of the rim. That's reasonably well aligned. It's not perfect. I'm going to have to fiddle with it a bit, I'm sure. You can see I've got my tools and parts laid out here ready to go. And of course, my hands are clean, both of them. They've been washed before I start final assembly. The chain adjuster on the right side there is already placed on the end of the axle with the bushing that will come through from the right side. Obviously the sprocket carrier will be on the left to align the sprocket with the output sprocket on the engine. This can be a little bit of a fiddly process to try to get everything in alignment. It's not complicated, there's not a lot of parts involved, but it does sometimes take a little finessing. The other thing I did is I put a little dielectric grease on this black round O-ring. It's really a seal you see here, as well as on the inside of the hub right here, because that is where the hub right here will meet that O-ring, and I didn't want to try to put that together dry. Here's that inner axle that I talked about earlier. Yamaha, I looked it up, actually does call that a sprocket axle. That's the technical term. And these are the flats that I was alluding to a few minutes ago. So let's go ahead and see if we can't get this together. I have the rear wheel assembly relatively positioned in the swing arm. As I mentioned, I think earlier, this can be a little bit fiddly because you have to get a number of things aligned all at the same time. And to do so without damaging the fresh paint or anything, the chrome, you have to pay attention. First thing I'm going to do is take the brake backer plate and install it in the right side of the rim like that. It doesn't make any difference at this point how it's oriented. Now I'm going to bring the wheel back a little bit, as far as I can, like that, because I have to have access from the left side to put the sprocket carrier assembly in place. You can see there how I've got that tire angled out so I can create space in here. Now taking the sprocket carrier assembly, I'm going to push the inner axle back a bit. You can see it just slides back and forth. And I'm going to pre-fit this like that. And now work this assembly back into place carefully. Rotate the flats so they can fit through the cutout here in the swing arm, like that. So you can see now, chipped a little bit of the paint there. You can see the flats are aligned here. Everything's in relative position. Now this spacer will go on the opposite side. Now this axle spacer will go between the brake backer plate and the swing arm. And it might take a little bit of jockeying to get that in there. Then the axle assembly. Oop, I lost my alignment there. There's something like that. And slip the adjuster over the swing arm notches. Just tap it through. So there you can see the adjuster on the outside of the swing arm, the bushing or spacer, and the axle going through. On the left side you can see the flats here for the inner axle. The chain adjuster goes over those flats like that. Then this larger inner nut will go on, and I'm going to put a little anti-seize on this. Put it on both threaded portions at the same time. Just thread that on, just finger tight, and then the actual axle nut. Thread that on. Just finger tight. So with the installation of these two nuts, and again they're only finger tight, that's the gist of the rear wheel installation. As I indicated, it can be a little fiddly to get everything in alignment at the right time. I'm not going to snug anything up right now. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. There's a lot more work to do here yet. Of course, the chain guard, those kind of things. The stay arm for the brake backer plate will have to be attached. I have all the parts for that. At this point, though, I think my next step is going to be sorting out the electrical harness and wiring before I do too much more reassembly, as I want to get that wiring harness in place. I'm going to have to probably rebuild and remanufacture a harness, or the harness that came off of it, because it's in pretty rough shape. So I think that'll be the subject of our next video, is working on the wire harness. At this point, I'm going to call it on this video, and that is installing rear wheel. Any issues or questions, feel free to drop me a note. Otherwise, thanks for watching.